The rise and fall of Carthage. Close your eyes. Imagine standing on a cliff above the Mediterranean Sea. The water below is deep blue, almost violet in the late afternoon light. The air smells of salt and cedar wood and something else, something ancient. Below you, spread along the curve of the coastline, is a city unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. Its harbor holds 200 warships. Its walls stretch for 20 miles. Its towers reach toward a sky painted gold and rose by a setting sun. This city is called Carthage, and for 600 years, it was the greatest power in the Western world. But almost no one remembers it today. This is its story. Part 1. The Phoenicians. To understand Carthage, we must travel even further back in time, to the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, to a narrow strip of land pressed between the mountains and the sea. This place was called Phoenicia. The people who lived here were not warriors. They were not conquerors. They were sailors, and merchants, and craftsmen of extraordinary skill. The Phoenicians invented the alphabet that you are, in a way, hearing right now. Every letter in every European language traces its roots back to these people on their narrow strip of coast. They were also the greatest sailors the ancient world had ever produced. While other civilizations feared the open sea, the Phoenicians sailed into it. They followed the stars at night. They read the winds. They built ships that could survive storms that would destroy anything else. And wherever they sailed, they built trading posts, small settlements at first, just a beach, a warehouse, a few houses. But over time, some of these settlements grew into something much larger. Around the year 814 BC, a group of Phoenician settlers sailed west from the city of Tyre. They crossed the length of the Mediterranean, past the islands of Cyprus and Malta, past the boot of Italy, past the green hills of Sicily, until they reached the coast of North Africa, what is today the country of Tunisia. And there, on a peninsula jutting into the sea, they built a city. They called it Carthage, the new city. We know it as Carthage. The land was perfect. The peninsula could be defended easily. The harbor was natural and deep. The soil around it was rich and fertile. And most importantly, Carthage sat at the very center of the Mediterranean world. Every ship sailing between the eastern and western sea had to pass nearby. The Carthaginians understood this immediately, and they built their entire civilization around controlling these waters. Part 2. The City of 1,000 Ships. For the first century of its existence, Carthage was simply one Phoenician colony among many. But then something changed. Back in the east, the great empires were stirring. Assyria, Babylon, Persia. One by one, they swept over Phoenicia. They destroyed the old cities. They disrupted the old trade routes. And the Phoenicians who survived looked west, to Carthage. Refugees arrived by the thousands, skilled craftsmen, experienced sailors, wealthy merchants with their gold and their knowledge. And Carthage, which had been a small trading post, began to grow. By the 5th century BC, Carthage was a city of perhaps 300,000 people. In a world where most cities held only 10 or 20,000, this was almost unimaginable. Its harbor was a marvel of engineering. The military harbor alone could shelter 220 warships, each in its own covered dock, each protected from the weather and from enemy eyes. Above the harbor rose the Admiral's Island, a circular tower from which the entire fleet could be observed and commanded. The city's walls were 30 feet high, 20 feet thick, and they ran for 23 miles around the peninsula. Inside those walls lived soldiers and senators, merchants and musicians, priests and philosophers. Carthage was not a savage place. It was a sophisticated, cosmopolitan city at the heart of a trading empire that stretched from Spain to Libya. The Carthaginians traded in everything: purple dye from their shells, the most valuable color in the ancient world, reserved for kings and emperors, glass from their workshops, silver from the mines of Spain, gold from the depths of Africa, tin from the mysterious islands far to the north, which we now call Britain. Their merchants traveled further than any other people of their age. One Carthaginian explorer named Hanno sailed south along the coast of Africa far enough to see what he described as a river of fire pouring into the sea at night. He had witnessed a volcanic eruption. Another explorer named Himilco sailed north into the Atlantic and returned with tales of fog and seaweed and strange creatures in the deep. He had reached the British Isles, and perhaps, some historians believe, Carthaginian sailors even reached the Americas thousands of years before Columbus. Part 3. The Gods of Carthage. Every great civilization has its gods, and the gods of Carthage were ancient and powerful, and sometimes terrible. The greatest of them was Baal-Hamon, Lord of the Sky, master of storms and seasons. He was depicted as an old man with a ram's horn sitting on a throne flanked by sphinxes. His consort was Tanit, the goddess of the moon and the stars, protector of the city. Her symbol was everywhere in Carthage, a simple shape, a triangle topped by a horizontal line topped by a circle, like a human figure reaching upward, reaching toward the sky. The Carthaginians built beautiful temples to their gods. They made offerings of grain and oil and animals, and according to some ancient sources, in times of great crisis, they made offerings of something more precious, their own children. This is one of the most debated questions in all of ancient history. Did the Carthaginians really practice child sacrifice? The Romans said they did, but the Romans were not exactly neutral observers. Archaeological evidence suggests something did happen in the sacred precinct called the Tophet, where the ashes of the very young were buried beneath carved stones. But whether this was sacrifice, or simply a cemetery for children who died young, we may never know for certain. What we do know is this: the Carthaginians were deeply religious people who took their obligations to their gods seriously, and who believed, as most ancient peoples did, that the fate of their city depended on the favor of heaven. Part 4. The Enemy at the Gates. For most of its history, Carthage had rivals, but no true enemy. It competed with the Greeks for control of Sicily and the western Mediterranean. There were wars, there were truces, there were long periods of uneasy peace. But then, a new power appeared in the world, rising from the hills of central Italy, disciplined, ruthless, hungry: Rome. At first, Rome and Carthage were not enemies. They were actually allies of a sort. They signed treaties recognizing each other's spheres of influence. Rome would stay out of Africa. Carthage would stay out of Italy. For a while, this arrangement worked. But then came Sicily, that large triangular island sitting in the middle of the Mediterranean. Both Rome and Carthage wanted it, and in 264 BC, almost by accident, they went to war over it. This was the First Punic War. Punic, from the Latin word for Phoenician. It would last 23 years. The Romans had never fought a naval war before. They were soldiers, not sailors, but they were also extraordinarily adaptable. They studied captured Carthaginian warships, they built their own fleet, and they invented a new weapon, a boarding bridge with a spike on the end that could be dropped onto an enemy ship, locking the two vessels together, turning a naval battle into a land battle, where Roman soldiers were far more comfortable. The war went back and forth for decades. Both sides won great victories. Both sides suffered catastrophic defeats. Entire Roman fleets were destroyed by storms. Carthaginian armies fought brilliantly in Sicily, only to be cut off from supplies. In the end, Rome won. Carthage was forced to surrender Sicily, to pay enormous reparations, to give up much of its fleet. It was a humiliation, but not a death blow. Carthage recovered. It turned its attention to Spain, where there were silver mines of almost unimaginable richness. A brilliant general named Hamilcar Barca led the conquest. He brought with him his young son, a boy of perhaps 9 years old. The boy had begged to come on the campaign, and Hamilcar, who was not a sentimental man, was moved by his son's passion. He made the boy swear an oath at the altar of Baal Hammon, an oath of eternal enmity toward Rome. The boy's name was Hannibal. Part 5. The Thunder of Hannibal. Hannibal Barca grew up in Spain, surrounded by soldiers and battles, and the relentless energy of a father who never forgot what Rome had done to Carthage. When Hamilcar died, Hannibal eventually took command of the army in Spain. He was 26 years old, and he was, simply, the greatest military commander the ancient world had ever produced. In 218 BC, Hannibal made a decision that still astonishes historians today. He would attack Rome, not from the sea, not from Africa. He would march his army overland, through Spain and France, and across the Alps, with 90,000 soldiers and 37 war elephants, in winter. The crossing of the Alps is one of the great epics of human history. The mountains were higher than anything his soldiers had ever seen. The passes were choked with snow. The paths were barely wide enough for a single man to walk. Local tribes attacked them from above, rolling boulders down the cliffs, showering them with arrows. Soldiers fell into ravines. Elephants slipped on ice. Men froze in the night. 15 days after entering the Alps, what remained of Hannibal's army emerged into northern Italy. He had lost almost half his men and most of his elephants, but he was on the right side of the mountains, and Rome had no idea what was coming. What followed were 3 years of the most devastating military campaigns in Roman history. At the Battle of the Trebia River, Hannibal destroyed a Roman army. At Lake Trasimene, he destroyed another. 15,000 Romans died in a single morning on the shores of that quiet lake. But the worst was yet to come. In the summer of 216 BC, the Romans assembled the largest army they had ever put in the field. 86,000 soldiers, the best warriors in Italy. They marched south to meet Hannibal near a small town called Cannae. What happened there is studied in military academies to this day. Hannibal was outnumbered. His center was weaker than the Roman lines, and he used this weakness as a trap. He allowed the Roman army to push his center back, to advance forward with confidence, to feel the flush of victory, while his stronger wings curved around them, like two arms closing in an embrace. By evening, the battle was over. 70,000 Romans lay dead on the plains of Cannae. It remains one of the bloodiest single days in the history of warfare. The Roman Senate wept. Mothers across Italy waited for sons who would never come home. And Hannibal stood in the middle of Italy, master of everything he could see. Rome was on its knees. Italian allies began switching sides. The road to Rome itself lay open. Hannibal's generals urged him to march, to finish what he had started. One of them said words that have echoed through history ever since. "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal. You do not know how to use one." Hannibal waited. He waited for reinforcements from Carthage. They never came. He waited for more Italian cities to rebel against Rome. Not enough of them did. He marched through Italy for 15 more years, winning battle after battle, but never delivering the killing blow. And Rome slowly rebuilt. Part 6. The End of Everything. In 202 BC, the final battle was fought, not in Italy, not near Rome, but in Africa, on the plains outside Carthage itself. A young Roman general named Scipio had taken the war to Carthage's doorstep, and Hannibal, recalled from Italy after 15 years, came home to defend his city. The two armies met at a place called Zama, and for the first time in his life, Hannibal lost a battle. The peace that followed was devastating for Carthage. It lost Spain, it lost its navy, it lost its right to make war without Rome's permission. Hannibal himself eventually fled into exile, hunted by Rome across the ancient world. He died by his own hand rather than be captured. His last words, according to legend: "Let us relieve the Romans of their fears by the death of a feeble old man." Carthage itself survived, diminished but alive. For 50 more years, it rebuilt its wealth through trade, and this made Rome nervous. A Roman senator named Cato the Elder ended every speech he gave, on any subject whatsoever, with the same 3 words: "Carthage must be destroyed. Carthago delenda est." In 149 BC, Rome found a pretext: a small war between Carthage and a neighbor. Roman armies landed in Africa. What followed was 3 years of siege. The people of Carthage fought with everything they had. They melted down gold jewelry to make weapons. Women cut off their hair to make ropes for catapults. Every street became a battlefield, every house a fortress. In the spring of 146 BC, the last defenses fell. The Roman general Scipio Aemilianus watched his soldiers move through the city. For 6 days, the fighting went on, house by house, floor by floor. 50,000 survivors were sold into slavery. The city was burned. And then, according to ancient accounts, the ruins were cursed, and salt was plowed into the earth so that nothing would ever grow there again. Carthage was gone. 600 years of civilization, erased in a week. Epilogue. What was lost? Standing where Carthage once stood, There is very little to see today. A few broken columns, some mosaic floors from the Roman city that was later built on the ruins. The harbor is still there, but it is small now, silted up, home to fishing boats rather than warships. We know so little about Carthage because Rome destroyed not just the city, but the libraries, the records, the history. Almost everything we know about Carthage was written by its enemies, who had every reason to make them seem barbaric and savage and deserving of their fate. But this much we know. They were a people who sailed to the edges of the known world, who built one of the great cities of antiquity, who produced in Hannibal one of the greatest commanders in history, who fought to the last to defend their home, and who were erased so thoroughly that even their name for themselves is lost. We call them Carthaginians, from the Roman and Greek words for their city. We do not know what they called themselves. Perhaps that is the saddest thing of all. Sleep now. Let the story of Carthage drift through your dreams, a city of ships and spices, of purple sails on a blue sea, of a young general crossing impossible mountains, of a people who believed their city would last forever, as all people do, as all cities do. Good night, and remember, every empire believed it would last forever. None of them did.